tonight. If you're listening to this when everything has slowed down, when messages have quieted, the street noise has softened, and the only light left in the room is coming from one small corner, I want you to do something unusual. Don't rush to believe, and don't rush to reject. Just listen as if this were a story delivered at the exact time you're most able to hear it, when you don't have enough energy left to perform, when you don't have enough patience left to comfort yourself with familiar excuses. And while you listen, watch one thing: how your body responds. Does your heartbeat change? Does your breathing slow? Do you feel anything in your chest, your forehead, your stomach, anything subtle, anything quiet? Because some stories don't aim for your mind. They aim for a deeper memory. Not the memory of a specific event, but the memory of a position, the place you used to stand inside yourself before you were pulled away from it. Have you ever felt the kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix? Not tired from doing too much, but tired as if something has been draining you from behind. You try resting, you try going to bed early, you try being positive, and still there's fog in your head. Still a gentle but constant pull downward. And the strangest part is this: that pull rarely shows up when you're at your weakest. It shows up when you're about to get stronger. The moment you decide, tomorrow I change, tomorrow I start, tomorrow I live for real, that's when a thought appears. Not now, do it tomorrow. A doubt that sounds perfectly reasonable. It can't be that simple. A feeling that seems undeniable. I'm not enough. And you step back again, not because you're lazy, but because something in you has been trained to accept being pulled as normal until you mistake it for personality. If you recognize that, then you'll understand why certain ancient traditions, especially within Gnostic streams, talk about a kind of attack on the mind. Not an attack with claws, not an attack with horror movie spectacle, but the most refined kind of power, making you believe every destructive thought in your head is you. Because once you assume every fear is yours, every sabotaging impulse is yours, every sudden wave of rage or numbness is yours, you'll punish yourself, derail yourself, imprison yourself without anyone ever needing to show their face. That's the cleanest prison there is. No bars, only thoughts you keep calling me. This is where the story in the Pistis Sophia enters. According to one version of the tradition, there is a moment many people believe the church never wanted you to read, not because it's insulting, but because it returns authority to the individual. Jesus stands before his closest disciples in a private space, not in the marketplace, not before a crowd, not delivering safe teachings that everyone can hear without changing anything. A sealed room, years after the resurrection in that telling, after the miracle seekers have fallen away, after the argument lovers have grown tired, leaving only those who truly want to know one thing: how not to be pulled. And then Mary Magdalene, often described in Gnostic literature as the one who asks the deepest questions, asks something you may hear as your own question. If dark forces strike the mind, if thoughts are invaded, if fear appears without explanation, if I become agitated or numb without knowing why, how do I protect myself? The frightening thing about that question is that it isn't about salvation after death. It's about surviving in the present, surviving your own mind, surviving the invisible forces that make you drop the best version of yourself. And in the version you shared, Jesus doesn't answer with a prayer. He doesn't tell them to ask the Father for help. He gives one word, an Aramaic word, short, sharp, like a cut. And the story claims that when Scripture moved through centuries of translation, that force was softened, an imperative turned into a request, a declaration turned into pleading, a sword turned into a begging bowl. You don't have to treat that translation story as literal history to understand the power mechanics behind it. Any system understands this. If individuals can stand up and protect themselves through inner authority, who needs intermediaries? Who keeps the gates? Who collects the offerings? If a person can sit alone in their room, place a hand over the chest, speak from wakefulness, and cut the pull at the root, they no longer depend on anyone else to grant them peace. Pause here for a moment. How long have you lived in the posture of asking? Asking for approval, asking for love, asking for permission, asking for one day without pain, asking even when you're doing the right thing, asking simply to feel safe. And the more you ask, the smaller you feel. The more you ask, the more power seems to live outside you. The more you ask, the more you believe you're missing something. Now, place your hand over your chest again. Your heartbeat doesn't ask permission. Your heartbeat declares life. It functions as a law, not a favor. And maybe that's the point. What was stolen from you wasn't knowledge, it was your voice of authority. In Gnostic language, the highest source is called the monad, pure, undivided consciousness without lack. And the physical world is described as a construct built by a lesser being, the demiurge, architect of limitation, convinced of its own supremacy. Beneath the demiurge are the Archons, the rulers of the mechanism, operating in layers most humans don't notice, keeping the inner spark in human beings from remembering its origin. You can hear this as myth, as symbolism, as psychology dressed in sacred language, and I'm leaving it open. If you don't believe in literal entities, treat Archons as a name for anything that pulls you away from yourself. Loops of fear, reflexive self-sabotage, cruel inner voices, endless distraction, vague dread, the sense of not belonging, the feeling that you're wrong at the root. Something doesn't need to be a creature to rule you. It only needs to control your choices. But the tradition insists on something that makes it dangerous. You are not from here. The spark in you, the part that can't tolerate falsehood, the part that refuses to live like a machine, doesn't belong to the construct. It fell here. It was trapped here. And the system, from fear to shame to hierarchies designed to make you feel unworthy, exists to keep you forgetting. Because when you forget, you're easy to manage. When you remember, you stop feeding the machine. That's why Jesus, in the Gnostic frame, isn't only a moral teacher. He is a reminder, an emissary from the pleroma, the fullness arriving to reactivate memory. Publicly, he speaks in ways the masses can absorb. Privately, he transmits mechanisms. And the strongest mechanisms are the ones that reclaim the mind, the place every prison begins. In the version you shared, the Aramaic word is described as pra, a short sound interpreted as sever, break off, release from bondage. You can keep pra as an anchor sound. But understand this. The word itself is only a switch. Your state is the electricity. A switch without electricity does nothing. Electricity without a switch scatters. In this story, Jesus doesn't hand over a syllable, he hands over a frequency behind the syllable. And the tradition says 3 components activate the word. Without them, you could say pra 1,000 times and nothing would change. The 3 components are recognition, authority, and vibration. Let's make recognition real, right now. Close your eyes for a few seconds. Not long, just a few. Bring your attention behind your forehead, as if you're looking into the space behind your eyes. Do you sense a quiet point that is simply observing? It doesn't argue. It doesn't panic. It just knows you're here. That is the witness. That is component 1, recognition. When you stand as the witness, you stop dissolving into thought. You watch thought like clouds passing. And anything that feeds on your dissolving, anything that needs you to forget you are the witness weakens. Open your eyes. Don't chase the feeling. Just remember, you touched a position you haven't stood in for a long time. Component 2. Authority. Authority isn't shouting. Authority isn't aggression. Authority is quiet certainty like gravity. Drop a stone, it falls. No debate required. Speak from the position of the owner of your inner space, and what doesn't belong must stop. No begging, no negotiation. That's why the tradition claims translations were softened, because authority eliminates dependence. But authority doesn't come from ego. It comes from truth. This is your mind. This is your home. You have the right to close the door. You have the right to remove what is uninvited. You have the right to sever attachments. Component 3. Vibration. Sound is vibration. Vibration affects the nervous system. You've heard a voice that calmed you instantly, or a noise that spiked your heart because vibration speaks to the body. The tradition says the word must be spoken from the chest with breath support, letting the vibration pass through the sternum, not merely from the throat. The throat begs, the chest declares. You speak it once, clear, short, certain. Now the 7-night practice shared as a reclaiming of sovereignty, not a theatrical exorcism. You can treat it as a clean nervous system practice or a spiritual ritual, depending on your lens. Here's the sequence. Tonight, before sleep, sit in a room that is dim but comfortable. It doesn't need to be pitch black. It only needs to be free from the harsh light that pulls you out of yourself. Place your hand over the center of your chest. Take 3 slow breaths. On the first breath, release the roles, the labels, the mask you wear at work, the mask you wear in your family, the mask that says you must never be weak. Let it loosen like a tight shirt coming off. On the second breath, release shame. Old mistakes, words you wish you hadn't said, days you wish you could rewrite. Don't argue with it. Just set it down like a stone leaving your pocket. On the third breath, release the identity of powerlessness. Not by fighting it, by returning it. Whisper inwardly, I give this back, and let it fall. After 3 breaths, enter component 1, recognition. Stand as the witness. Whisper, I am here. I am aware. I am not what pulls me. When you feel you're standing in the right place, move into component 2, authority. Don't tense, just become sure. Feel the command arrive naturally. Sever, stop, pra. Then component 3, vibration. Inhale gently, letting the chest rise slightly, and on the exhale, speak once from the chest. Pra. Not shouted, not whispered in fear, spoken like a law. Then sit in silence for 7 breaths. Observe. Don't demand fireworks. Don't hunt proof. Just notice. Is the mind quieter? Is the body softer? Is there more space between you and thought? Repeat this for 7 nights. Night 1. Nothing dramatic may happen, but small shifts matter. You may fall asleep with fewer loops. You may dream more vividly because less noise means more signal. Night 2. You begin to notice the difference between thoughts and the thinker. Thoughts arise, but they don't glue you immediately. You gain a moment of choice. Night 3 is often where people describe change. The fog begins to thin. Spirals lose traction. A gap appears between stimulus and reaction, and that gap is where freedom lives. Night 4. You may react less to triggers that used to ignite you. The world doesn't change, but you stop being pulled by it the same way. Night 5. You begin to notice procrastination arriving on schedule. Right as you're about to do something important, the voice says, tomorrow. But this time, you see it, and being seen is what makes it weak. Night 6. Certain people or environments may feel uncomfortable, not because they are evil, but because your energy no longer fits old hook and line dynamics. you become harder to manipulate, harder to provoke, harder to drain. Night 7. You stop believing and you start knowing through experience. You stand in front of a pull and you don't get dragged. Whether you call that pull an Archon or an old reflex, the result is the same. You reclaim the wheel. After 7 nights, the tradition says to watch for confirmation. Some people strongly attached to old patterns may feel irritated around you. They won't know why. They may avoid you. Don't turn this into superiority. Just note, when you change frequency, old attachments lose access. Old patterns seek new anchors. You may also notice self-sabotage weakening. Self-sabotage tends to strike right as you improve. You can't do it. Before, you believed it and stopped. Now the thought appears. You place your hand on your chest. You speak once from your sternum, pra, and you continue. The difference isn't that the thought disappears. The difference is that the thought is no longer the boss. It becomes noise. You remain the driver. And now the closing. In the most cinematic way, but still open. Maybe what was buried for centuries wasn't a secret word. Maybe what was buried was your posture. The world trained you to beg. The world trained you to fear. The world trained you to believe peace requires permission. And in that posture, you broadcast lack. You broadcast separation. You broadcast, I have no authority. Anything, whether you see it as metaphysical or psychological, that feeds on that signal grows stronger. But tonight, you aren't collecting information. You aren't collecting beliefs. You are testing an experience. You return to the witness. You speak a command from the chest. You close the door. And you discover the one thing every pulling force fears most. Presence with authority. You can call it the frequency of the monad. You can call it awakening. You can call it sovereignty. But it's the same reality. When you are present, you are harder to control. When you are unified, you are harder to drain. When you recognize a pull, you create space for choice, and choice is freedom. Take one deep breath. Feel your chest rise. Feel your heart. Your heartbeat doesn't ask permission. It declares, tonight, you do the same. When everything is quiet, sit in dim darkness. Place your hand on your heart. Take 3 breaths. Step into the witness. Speak once from your chest, pra. Then sit in silence for 7 breaths. Do that 7 nights, and let your life answer. If this tradition is true in a spiritual sense, you're stepping out of the band where attachments feed. If it's true in a psychological sense, you're cutting reflex loops with presence. Either way, you're doing the most important thing, reclaiming authority inside your own mind. And if you want one final line to end your audio, slow, steady, unmistakable, let it be this. I don't ask permission to be at peace. I don't beg to be free. I remember what I am. I speak from sovereignty. I sever every hook of fear. I observe. I choose. I am here. Then leave a few seconds of silence so the listener's heartbeat can finish what words began.